John Hammond is the Orlando Magic GM, and he is tasked with the rebuild here, trying to get it right. He's a smart basketball man, been around for a long time. Magic have been, bottom feeders for a little bit here. You and I both thought it would work out with Frank Vogel.
Yeah, we did.
We really did.
We liked him until he stopped coming on our show.
That's why it didn't work out. He gave a little Tiki and Tierney mojo, and then he ignored us. He got too big for his britches, and it didn't work out for him. But now they have Mo Bamba. They've got a coach you and I both love, Steve Clifford, who's also been on our show. Let's talk Magic Hoops with the aforementioned John Hammond. John, Tiki and Tierney, how are you today?
I'm great, and one thing I just learned in the last moment while I was waiting to come on was that when you guys asked to come on the show, I come on the show.
That's right, John. If you know what's good for you, man, you'll never turn us down.
And I know that.
Even like in 3 years when you guys were in the NBA Finals. Don't get too big for your britches, John, okay?
I'm on the show. Count me in.
Love it. Lifetime booking, right? So let's start with the draft here. The first couple of picks, I would imagine your war room wasn't particularly surprised. One thing I thought that Dallas really liked Mo. I thought that could be an option at number 5. Were you surprised when it was time for the selection at number 6? Did you get the guy that you really, truly wanted? And what else were you considering in terms of what you're comfortable divulging?
Wow. You look at all kinds of different scenarios going into the draft, the what-if scenarios. And we had some what-if scenarios that Mo possibly could have been there at 6, but we kept going back. There's no way that is going to happen, and we really did not feel that was going to be the case. So obviously, when it presented itself on draft night, it was a very easy decision for us. Best player on the board, that was Mo Bamba, and I can't tell you how excited we were to be able to draft him, and how excited we are to have him now. And, hey, look, these kind of guys at this level, when you're picking, top 5, top 10 guys, you need those guys to be difference makers if you have a chance to move forward. And that's what we're hoping that Mo's going to be for us, and we think he can be.
Yeah, he's so long. There's so much that you can talk about, whether it's his defensive acumen or his ability, as he started to see in some of these offseason workouts and visits that he's taken on, shoot the 3 ball. Where is his ceiling with you guys? I mean, what can he improve on? Obviously, he's very young, but where can he go? I mean, how big and how great can he get?
Well, you say, okay, where can he go? It all probably comes down to the offensive end of the floor. I'll say, as he gets stronger, first and foremost, he's going to have to get stronger, and he will do that. Naturally, he's going to do that, and we're going to put him in the position to be as strong as he can possibly be from a nutritional standpoint, from a strength training standpoint, from a conditioning standpoint. We're going to do all those things for him to help him along the way. But so as he's doing that, and then look, offensively, it's just going to continue to improve offensively. To have, you think about these great back to the basket players, and you can say, well, those guys are few and far between today, and they are. But still, these players, when you throw the ball to them on the block, the great players, what they're going to do. The question is, can you stop it? So you do something like that, and now every player today also, their ability to stretch the floor. All these bigs can stretch the floor. You already talked about Mo doing that, showing his ability to do that in his pre-draft workouts, and he showed that at times in Texas. And I think that's going to be he just has a naturally soft touch for the ball. And you know what? I didn't mention defense because I do think to a certain extent that's going to be the easy part of the game for him. He's got quick feet laterally and his ability to block shots. He should be able to come into the league and do that immediately.
Oh, his defensive acumen, his defensive skill set is beyond special. That's why it's almost a waste of time to even talk about like he could be Bill Russell. I mean, who knows what defensively? I don't know that he has a ceiling. And John, you've been around the game a long time, going back to when the Pistons got it rebuilt in the early 2000s. Man, how much the game has changed. I remember when Ben Wallace was in the middle of those great Piston teams, and I could call them great because they won a championship and almost got the second one with Larry Brown when they lost in Game 7, and before that with Coach Carlisle, of course. But Big Ben was in the paint. He couldn't shoot free throws. He was a prototypical, throwback big, and now you got guys, Embiid and KP and all these guys who are 7-foot change, knocking down 3 balls. I obviously, the game has changed. But is all the change good, or is it a little bit too much, too fast, and we're kind of caught in this vacuum of almost a loss of identity for certain types of players?
I don't think so. I think it's good. Look, I'm a baseball guy. When I go to the baseball games, I like to see home runs. I like to see the big plays, home run, or maybe I'll take a no-hitter too. But people love offense, and I think in our league today, I think people want to see points scored. They want to see three-point shots. They want to see slam dunks. They want to see great athletic plays, and I think that's where it is. It's funny. You talk about that team in Detroit. It's funny that Joe Dumars always talks about Ben being the glue guy for that team. He's surrounded with Chauncey, Rip, Tayshaun, and Rashid. Rashid's ability to stretch the floor. Ben Wallace could feel it even that far back. Ben got with Rashid and saw this guy's ability to shoot the ball, and he started working on his outside shot. Just probably too late for him at that point in his career. But he could see it. He could feel it. He could see where the game was going.
Oh, wow, interesting.
Rashid's ability to stretch the floor.
Didn't know that. Okay, big. Yeah. I'll tell you, when they used to ring that bell at that when he had the big afro and they block his shot. Remember, they'd actually ring that. It was it was at the AC/DC, the bell.
Yeah.
Talk about an ominous. I mean, Big Ben was a beast. But we're talking to John Hammond from the Magic.
Always put a smile on my face.
Yeah, he's one of the good guys. He looked scary mean, but he was actually a humble, really approachable, really nice guy, too. I'm with you on that, John.
John, as you guys rebuild this team a little bit, and obviously Mo Bamba is a big part of that, and this year and in the coming years, who's the locker room leader? Right? Who's the vet that's going to set the culture here? Obviously, it starts with a little bit with the coach, but who's going to handle that role? Because just as well as all of us, it's one of the most important things that you can have.
I go back to a story real quickly. I'll tell you, years ago, I was coaching with Larry Brown in Los Angeles with the Clippers. That goes way back, and we traded for Mark Jackson.
Oh yeah.
And Jeff Van Gundy, Jeff was his assistant at the time, was Pat Riley's assistant, and we were talking about. I called Jeff, and we just traded Charles Smith, and I said, "Hey man, we need leadership. Well, you got Mark Jackson, he's a good leader." And I can remember that night in the locker room, first game, went up to Mark Jackson, and said, "Hey Mark, great to have you here. We need leadership." And Jeff talked about your ability your leadership with the Knicks, and he said, I'll never forget Mark saying to me, stopped me almost in mid sentence, said, "Hey John, let me tell you something. Make no mistake, Pat Riley's the leader of the Knicks." And sometimes, look, you don't have that leadership's got to come from somewhere, and it doesn't always come on the floor. Sometimes it's got to come from the coach. Sometimes it's got to come from other sources. Very seldom does it ever happen from a front office standpoint. Maybe the Jerry West, the Joe Dumars, those kind of people can do that sort of thing. But if it's not from someone on the court, on the plane, it's got to be someone on that bench, and maybe it's got to be that coach.
That's good stuff. I love those stories. That was a pretty good Clippers team too. That back then the Clippers were still kind of lumped into as a joke of a franchise, but those were the only couple of good years that they actually had with Charles Smith and Mark Jackson, and they had some good players. Obviously, a couple of trades that John just hit. John, I want to take it back to the War Room. And you said before, we're talking to John Hammond from the Magic, their GM here on Tiki and Tierney, CBS Sports Radio and CBS Sports Network, where you were pleasantly thrilled that Mo was sitting there at number 6 for you. Somebody else was there at 6, and you passed, and so did a bunch of other teams, and that's Michael Porter. What was the conversation like? We know you love Bamba, so we don't need to even reset that, but how much of a consideration was Porter at 6 when he was still there for you?
Oh, still a consideration, obviously, going into the draft. Look, that was basically those kind of things end up a medical decision. And, it's I love how Jeff Weltman always says this. Jeff says, like scouts all have different opinions, and sometimes doctors all have different opinions to a certain extent on the prognosis of a player, patient, whatever you might say. And so, look, pretty simple. Had Michael been healthy, what is he, number 1, number 2 pick in this draft? Who knows what he is? Probably would have been somewhere right there in that range. But health was a factor, and health was a factor in that decision. That's the only reason he slid to where he did, plain and simple.
14, And I remember Tiki and I were talking about this the day of the draft, so before the draft, and I thought that a certain team, and that certain team, Denver fits that description, John, in my opinion. A certain team could roll the dice, not so much where they are in the draft in terms of the number, 7 or 10 or 12, whatever, but more so the composition of the roster. For like a team like the Knicks, who are pretty bereft of talent outside of KP, your team trying to build things up. There's certain teams that you couldn't be that reckless in trying to hit a home run where you possibly strike out for a guy who can't play. But where the Thunder's got the Nuggets have some players where it's still a risk, but it seems like it's one that's easier to swallow if you're in Denver's front office more so than your front office or some of the other teams that try to get to 35, 40 wins and eventually beyond. Does that make sense?
100%. You look at us last year, so we had the 6th pick of the draft last year, also Jonathan Isaac. And by the way, we do think heading into the future You put Mo Bamba and Jonathan Isaac on the front line together defensively, I think it has a chance to be a premier defensive team. Now, that's how soon that's going to happen, we don't know, but it has a chance to be that. But Jonathan Isaac was injured a large part of the season. So, man, how difficult would it be for us to tell our fan base that Jonathan missed, a large chunk of the season, but we're going to draft this guy, and we don't know exactly if he's going to be ready to play. Our fans start looking at us like, wait a minute,
yeah,
hard pill to swallow. And even though you talk about the Knicks, you got Porzingis out for a large part of the season, and you draft another guy with some health issues. That's hard. You just get to the point where you're Denver. Look, there's a certain point you say risk versus reward, and look, it's dropped far enough. The risk has dropped far enough of the draft. We're almost out of the lottery, guys, and if we're almost out of the lottery, man, what's the reward on this? Yeah. I don't want to say it's a simple decision, but it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, we could roll the dice at that point. John, really good catching up. John Hammond, one of the good guys in the league and one of the smart, sharp, perceptive guys in the league as well. GM of the Magic. Thanks for hopping on, John. We'll talk lifetime, when you guys get good. You got to come back on the show, all right?
You call, I'm on.
I love it. Love it.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it, buddy.
Be good, John.
Thanks, you guys.
There you go.